understanding kind of the mindset, shall we
Right.
say, of the local community. So listening has been the biggest tool for me. And then, of course, when you combine that with, we have some of the best archives in the world. I mean, when I was on the board out at the Steelworks Center, there were PhD candidates that were coming
It's
here
amazing.
to study about this
Yeah.
period. So it's kind of amazing that if you have any curiosity at all, and that's just something that I was born with. I mean, I'm curious about just about everything. Why is this happening? Or who is that person?
Yeah.
Or what transpired? Because over time, you tend to be separated from that immediate, experience.
Right.
And so you lose the emotional connection. But I have found just over the last, 10 years, you bring up certain things, something about Pueblo's history, whether it's a sports related or whether it's something that happened in government or it's something that happened in business. It could be just almost anything. There's an amazing emotional hook.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it's exclusively Pueblo, but Pueblo, there were some amazing things that happened, just over the last 100 years, 150 years. In fact, this is the 150th anniversary of the Colorado State Fair this year. So another big, because we missed the 150th anniversary of the city. It happened during the pandemic.
Right.
It just went and went by.
Yeah.
So that's pretty powerful when you can look back and really link and tie into, your immediate experience, something that you can follow the trail all the way back 150 years.
Pueblo.
Yeah, exactly.
Pueblo. It's Pueblo at its best right there. Yeah. It's KPHT 95.5, Pueblo's Greatest Hits on a Friends Friday with my friend Gregory Howell in today. It's Pueblo's Greatest Hits, KPHT 95.5. A Friends Friday, Gregory Howell in here today. We're talking about Pueblo, how he ended up here. Why is he still here? That's what I want to know. What happened? What's kept you here? I mean, opportunity knocks all over the place, I'm sure, but you keep finding other things going on here right now. Tell us about some of these things that have kept you here.
Well, there's a lot that's happened, and I think all of it has to do with the fact that, Pueblo offers so much, just in terms of a real human experience, something that's really rooted, in mind, body, soul, spirit.
Tangible stuff here.
And I think it has a lot to do with the individual, with the family, with school, with church. Of sport, most definitely. I mean, I'm amazed, the deep-rooted, sport,
Well, the big thing, if you ask somebody in Pueblo where they went to school,
oh my gosh,
they don't care about where you went to college. They want to know what high school you went to.
Exactly. And I, in the beginning, of course, I would just mention some high school, and just and people go, I don't remember that high school. Where was that high school in Pueblo? But, no, that was one of the first wake-up calls, and then to look at and to understand the strength of these alumni associations at the high school level.
Yes.
And then,
then the bell game.
The bell game, of course, is one of those. I went to Berkeley as an undergraduate, so Berkeley and Stanford have a very similar, one of the oldest rivalries in the nation.
But we're talking college there.
College, exactly.
Yeah.
So when I got to Pueblo and I heard about, what's the bell game all about? And then I felt like I was at what we call the big game, which is the game between Berkeley and Stanford. It was the same intensity, but it was at a high school level.
Right.
So I thought, man, they're starting really early.
Yeah.
But that I think that plays well into just this notion of Pueblo pride. Because I have lived all over the world in different parts of the world. And it's probably one of the few places where that level of pride is really, you can feel it. It's tangible in the air. And you just, it's, again, when you start listening to the stories of those.
Everybody's got one.
I was just reading the autobiography on Dutch Clark. And you start reading that book and literally, just chapter by chapter. The whole section on Central High School, it was like a breakdown day by day about what went on at Central High School. So for me, and these are, national, international figures,
right?
Dutch Clark. And I'm so glad to see that the Dutch Clark Stadium, the parking lot, Trees Please, which is a local nonprofit here, Jean Latka and Jean Eskra, are working to take out a strip of that hideous asphalt there on Abriendo, and they're doing a huge fundraising campaign right now to put in this beautiful bank of trees. And then Nick Latka, the late Nick Latka, who did that beautiful bronze, I think it's a bronze, whatever, the sculpture of Dutch Clark there.
Yeah.
They're going to make that so beautiful now. And that will be just such a nice, because now that they're redoing the Levee mural, there's all these access points.
Right.
And that big, huge piece of asphalt, it just
kind of takes away from all of it.
God, it's going to be so nice when they finish that. But no, sport, my dad was a pro in several sports. So growing up, and my mom is a big statistician. So I grew up in a family where sport was a big deal.
Wow.
Really big deal. But it isn't until you get to a community where sport is really part of that annual pilgrimage ritual. And that's exciting. That's fun.
That kind of brings everybody together.
It does. It does. And of course, then if you lose one year, you just get ready for the next year.
You start getting ready the day after.
No, it's exciting. Really exciting.
Gregory Howell. Why do I have this problem? Man? Gregory Howell.
Yeah.
Gregory Howell. It's not that hard.
No,
it's not one of those multi.
And I don't have all 7 consonants.
Maybe that's
in a
the
row.
problem there. Yeah. Gregory Howell in here on a Friends Friday. Brought to you by Advantage Home Mortgage. It's Pueblo's greatest hits, KPHT 95.5. Friends Friday, my friend in here today, Gregory Howell, and talking about how he got here, why he's still here. And there's some things that kind of have your footprint all over them here, your thumbprint or whatever you want to say. And one of those is the old Alpha Beta meatpacking plant. Now, that was in full operation. When I graduated in high school, that was in full operation. And that was a good place as far as pay to get a job in that. But you kind of came in here and saw this as an opportunity, that empty building, right?
Well, it's a fascinating story. And I actually, in a previous life, had worked on 2 other meatpacking plants, one in Shanghai and one in Berlin. Now, when I came to Pueblo, meatpacking was like the last thing on my mind.
Trying to get away from it.
But when I saw the building, I immediately knew who designed it. Because Hans-Peter Henschen, the Norwegian, who designed and really was kind of the leader of the entire, what's called the Rational Factory. Henry Ford was of this school of thought, and Hans-Peter Henschen, because the Rational Factory is about people, processes, and successful outcomes. So it really is about, well, I think, honestly, they just wanted to lower their labor costs. But if they created, Henry Ford created the assembly line.
Yeah.
And then same thing, Hans-Peter Henschen did the same thing with meatpacking. But with meatpacking, because it's so intricate in terms of the number of steps that are required, because it's not just about meat, but they decided in the late 1800s that animals could march up to the 4th floor of a building without injuring themselves.
That was amazing. I always thought that was amazing.
It is phenomenal. But what's really amazing is gravity. I mean, a simple thing like gravity was transformative in this Rational Factory process. So if you marched all the animals up to the 4th floor, you could use gravity to take care of, you had the hooves and the horns, you had all of the tallow, you had the blood, the list goes on.
It's all going to run downhill.
You just basically give it a place to go and would drop it down. So what I was amazed, though, is when I started studying Hans-Peter Henschen, this was one of the first. We're trying to determine if it was the first. We're very close. The first of 300 that he built around the world. Wow. So Hans-Peter Henschen was like a rock star. And in fact, in 1915, when they started the designs for this plant, he wrote what is referred to as the Slaughterhouse Bible. It's still being published. It's 300 pages long. And if you could follow each chapter, which were like guidelines, because in 1906, the U.S. government finally passed the Food Safety Act, which basically meant, because meatpacking plants were notorious for being really unsanitary.
Well, I'm sure.
I mean, you can. Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle. That book alone kind of took you into a place you didn't want to ever eat meat again. But this Food Safety Act, basically, he just was brilliant, and he was both engineer and designer. So he had both right brain and left brain going. And so he published this book. And so what that meant is if you followed all of those guidelines, you could actually have U.S. government inspectors on site stamping the meat U.S. government inspected products. That was a game changer. In fact, the billboard that was in front of the meatpacking plant for decades, at the very bottom, it said U.S. government inspected products. So he was able to take, government, certification.
If you follow our process.
Oh, my gosh, it's amazing. So what we're doing now, though, is really trying to define if it was, in fact, the first, because that's when he went into private practice So there are different ways to look at, because he did work for other firms. He emigrated in 1902 from Norway. So he did work for some other firms, but it was in 1915 when he kind of really excelled in his private practice, which was based in Chicago. So it was the same time as Louis Sullivan. So Adler and Sullivan built the Opera House, and that was their first project outside of Chicago.
Wow.
So here you have Hans-Peter Henschen, which became the model. I mean, it was so big. It's 250,000 square feet. There are no load-bearing walls in the main plant. And so this notion of having, not load-bearing walls can be really prohibitive if you're trying to shake up. If innovation changes and technology changes, you need to redo your assembly line or processing. It's kind of hard when you have to remove a load-bearing wall, especially if there's 250,000 square feet.
Right.
But that kind of flexibility allowed the plant to, and what he did was, it was cluster designs. So all of these systems were based in clusters. So you would go from one department to another to really, achieve whatever, outcome you wanted to have. So we're trying to figure out exactly if it was the first. I have reached out to, and I work with, the Henschen grandchildren and great-grandchildren and the Knuckles family, the Knuckles grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Because when we started to dig into the story, what happened to that plant really was, it really was groundbreaking. And things happened there that never happened anywhere else in the world. And so when I do the tours, the way that I got involved in the project was my art gallery, which was at First and Main. I was taking a break after 6 years. It was a fantastic experience, but I wanted to move the gallery to another location. So I reached out to Ryan McWilliams, who owns the former Alpha Beta Meatpacking, now called Water Tower Place. I told him I wanted to bring my art gallery there. Well, at that time, he was still trying to figure out the final plan for the building, for the complex. And he's, of course, of amazing rail experience. So soft side, hard side, engineering side. And so the original concept, because there are like 3 junctions there, and 1 million rail cars still go through Pueblo each and every year. So that location is unique. And so he was proposing a rail maintenance facility. He had agreements and all kinds of relationships with a lot of international rail organizations. So it was going to become this rail-centric kind of hub.
Right.
Well, I'm sure I wasn't alone, but there were others that said, you are right at the edge of the Riverwalk. You're right in the Grove. And people forget how centrally located the Grove is.
Right.
It's like this Bermuda Triangle in Pueblo.
It is.
So basically, we had a conversation. I chose a location for the art gallery within the space.
So I want this part of the building.
And then I started to, because I've had experience in Shanghai and Berlin, because a meatpacking plant is a beast.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's 250,000 square feet. You just don't turn this thing and flip it overnight. So, and in fact, it took 1.5 years to actually remove garbage, waste. 1.5 million pounds had to be removed. That's how much waste had accumulated over several decades, because the building was basically abandoned, forgotten. And it's very easy to make these things invisible, but 250,000 square feet right in downtown,
right in the middle of everything,
you can't miss it.
Yeah.
So that was the real big deal, was, looking at how, so when I proposed the gallery, there were others that were proposing a lot of different things. So it has really kind of become like this community center, and it's kind of a vertical urban village. So it will have everything from housing to food to education. I mean, Johnny's Boiler Shop, which is one of the great legacy industries from 1946, they're headquartered inside of Alpha Beta with the Water Tower Place. And, they're busier than they've ever been.
So they're doing welding and that stuff?
Oh, my God, the steel fabrication shop.
So they're not down there still?
No, they're right inside. So, and it's amazing what they do. We've had oil tankers in there. We've had boats. We've had... you name it. They're redoing dam infrastructure there.
Wow, I had no idea.
It's a really powerful operation there. Yeah, it's exciting. And then we still have farmers that come in off the mesa. They're like 90 years old. They come in with mangled metal, and we kind of, they wait for them to fix it on the spot. And I never see any money exchange. It's like green chilies and pizza.
Yeah,
there's kind of this
Pueblo,
biblical.
Man.
It's kind of this biblical exchange.
Gregory Howell in here on a Friends Friday on KPHT 95.5, Pueblo's greatest hits. Pueblo's greatest hits, KPHT 95.5.